Should I just open it for Q&A, or should I go through the question? With the question first. Okay. Sudah, sendiri baca, sendiri jawab.
To get things going.
To get things going.
Is this KPM's list of questions?
No. I have two sets of questions. Okay. Further from Seminar Pemikiran Islam, this event will focus on the don't need to do that introduction. Okay. This would explore following ideas. Against the backdrop of development of various sciences by Muslim scholars and thinkers, and eventually how Muslims built one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world, what were the main factors or drivers behind the Muslim success story? It sounds very romanticism. Yeah? And this is what Malik bin Nabi, if you remember yesterday we did mention Malik bin Nabi's name. Malik bin Nabi main thesis or idea was about creation of civilization. And started with, he focused that civilization should start with man. Can you mention the three major elements? Man, time, and soil. But he said it all should be departed from the creation of man's soul. Okay. And so remember, Malik bin Nabi did mention about the three realms in human life, on how it will create a civilized society. The realm of objects, the realm of personality, and the realm of ideas. And the realm of ideas is the highest realms of all. And these three realms depend. Sometimes, if the realm of object dominating the discourse in the society, then it will start in the pre-civilized society, like we have in many third world countries, or what they call it developing countries. They start with the realm of objects, and also the realm of personality and the realm of ideas. Any civilized community, they've reached that. That is why when I was commenting about was it about past yesterday, when they refute, they were after 2008 election, they were in the right track, moving towards the realm of idea when they started to talk about negara berkebajikan. But unfortunately now they regress back. They started to emphasize more on the realm of personality, talking about kepimpinan ulama, and now going back to hudud or whatever, dealing with something which is tangible and dealing with legalistic framework, etc. And Malik bin Nabi also talk about what we said yesterday, the rise of any civilization should be superseded with the creation of civilized human being. And in dealing with that, he said that most of Muslim countries, unfortunately, when he was dealing specifically with the Northern African community, they are because of their heavily connectedness with the realm of object, they have this kind of the attitude of colonializability. They're ready to be colonialized. And when the colonials came, they easily could be colonized. And partly because of their, their dependentness on the authority rather than being independent human being. So that's one thing. Another thing, he said lamenting the past and romanticizing the past would never help them move forward. Jadi Malik bin Nabi was saying that in order to regain back this civilization of ours, we have to start back in building individuals, and reviving the vital energy in every society, and to combine it with religion. And he came up with the idea that had been inspired by ayat Allah will never change the fate of a nation until they change something within themselves. So he said that within themselves, he said that every society has their own vital energy. Kalau China kata chi, tapi it's not for fighting purpose. It's for, every society and every community, they have their own, talent. And if they combine that with religion, and it was addressing Muslims, they could, it could explode just like Einstein theory of relativity, explode. And that's what happened to the Turkish tribe, to the Arabs, when they managed to create a civilization, because they managed to find and they managed to realize their vital energy, and they combined it with religion. So Malik bin Nabi, unlike many of the post-colonialist Muslim scholars who were looking at the West as the others, as the enemy, he said no, there are a lot of things that we of course he's been critical towards a lot of Western ideas about colonials, but again he said that in order to create a civilization, in order to engage with the realm of idea, we must be extra cautious in dealing with ideas. He said, not everything from the West should be rejected, because he said that a lot of things that have been produced in the Western world during Renaissance and after the Enlightenment actually have their roots back to Islamic civilization. I'm not only talking about the hard sciences, but also to the ideas. We're talking about the idea of democracy. I did mention about Professor John Keane in his book Love and Death of Democracy, how we managed to relate between the modern idea, the modern thoughts, the modern practice of democracy, as it root back to the idea of shura, and the idea of human rights, idea of justice. The only thing is, in the Western world, because they have managed to reach the realm of idea and making it as the most prevailing discourse in their life, so they keep moving forward, and based on the values that they adhere to, they manage to create something which suitable not only for themselves, but also they're trying to make it a universal values that should be adopted by many. In dealing with that, Malik bin Nabi looked into the issue of Eurocentrism. Yesterday we talked about Derrida. Who said about Derrida? Derrida and Foucault talking about deconstruction. And for Foucault, who's known of his knowledge is power. You know what does the word mean? Anybody from SOAS? That's what I was going to do. Knowledge is power.
That's from Foucault,
yeah. What does that mean?
Power knowledge.
Yeah.
Power knowledge.
It is
Knowledge reinforces power. Power determines knowledge. What is knowledge? What is not?
Yeah.
So he denies power from the institution actually. Dia tak nampak power tu kepada institution yang macam polis, negara, government.
Governmentality. Kan?
Dia nampak benda tu macam knowledge tu dia menjadi culture dan mempengaruhi sosial.
It goes beyond that by by saying that knowledge actually is defined by those in power. When you deal about governmentality, it's talking about how you dare to go to people like Edward Said, for example. It's very Foucauldian in a way, very post-colonialist. They're talking about Eurocentrism, on how Eurocentric intellectual universe has managed to define things.
Tapi dia sebutlah juga yang power knowledge tu dimanipulkan oleh government ataupun superstructure.
Yeah, precisely.
Untuk menjadikan
Rakyat berdisiplin.
Yes.
Discipline and punish.
Discipline and punish. Okay. So for the post-colonialists, when they're looking at that, they say that this Eurocentric realm actually was part of the products of the colonials. Actually was that idea that pushed the colonials to invade others and it rooted back even to the period of the Greek people. The Greek, what's his name, Plato in his Republic, when he was talking about the Greek and the others, the creation of self and other, and he was talking about civitas. Everybody was living, or every man, and he single out women and children, and also the slaves. Every freeman living in the Greek police, they are the civilized people, or what we call as civitas. And anybody who live beyond that police or beyond that city, they are barbarians. So the same mindset being adopted by the colonials when they launched their missions of colonization. The way they look at others, they are barbarians, they are uncivilized, and we should educate them. Burden, white man's burden. So that was the very idea. So Malik bin Nabi was dealing with this and very cautious about it, but he was very selective as well. He said, tak boleh macam gini, kita nak paint benda tu salah. Maksud, we have to be, apa dia kata? Idea dia gunakan tu. Lupa lagi ni. Apa tu? Kita kena berhati-hati dengan melihat bahawa ada power tu selective things, so that should be adopted by it was addressing Muslim society in order to create civilization. Apa mana kita ni?
Eurocentrism.
Eurocentrism. Okay.
So what should be adopted?
Pardon?
What should be adopted for us to...
Inquisitive mind. Did I mention that? Oh, you did. Tak, maksudnya bila kita tengok apa ni, all those ideas from the West apa semua, kita tengok dengan inquisitive mind. Kita bukan, dia ada dua sikap. Pertama, rejectionist. You just reject everything from the West. Macam siapa tu? Geng-geng sahabat-sahabat Azman. Sebab dia kata itu semua it was sprung out of the secular worldview. Satu lagi, yang diistilahkan oleh Syed Hussein Alatas sebagai
minda tertawan.
Captive mentality, golongan captive mentality who thought that we must adopt everything from the West because we are uncivilized, we are backward, we are underdeveloped. So by only embracing everything from the West, we can be like that. So for Malik bin Nabi, no, that's not the case. I mean, Muslims have been taught since Quran was revealed with inquisitive mind.
Sorry, for the second attitude, which is adopting everything, meaning you say you want to be the civilized, you have to take everything from the West. Is that the approach that was taken by, for example, Atatürk and also Bolivar?
The modernists, yes. What is known as Muslim secularists. Atatürk, by the Bourguiba, and even by UMNO when they first established Malaysia. Tapi dia agak beza sikit. It's very special. Malaysia was a special case. Dia tak boleh kan? Lebih kepada Atatürk dan Bourguiba lah kan. Algeria pun suka juga waktu itu. Most of the Arab regimes adopted. Shah Reza Pahlavi kan, dia adopted westernization policies. Jadi kata Ben Nabi tak boleh lah. Kita tak boleh ambil antara dua tu. Maksudnya kita kena ada inquisitive mind. So sebab tu dia kata kena reach the realm of idea. Okay. Instead of talking about objects or personality. So jadi kalau kita lihat memang inquisitive mind inilah yang diajarkan oleh Quran kan. Wala taqfu ma laysa laka bihi ilm. Jangan cakap benda yang kita tak ada ilmu tentangnya. And this verse in specific has created a revolution. Just like I like to share with a lot of people that, you know, one thing, water created revolution, created a civilization for the Arabs. Water. And the very specific verse is Surah Ma'idah, verse number 6 in Quran. How was it? Air. Air telah mengubah orang Arab daripada badui tak tentu orang ni jadi civilized people. macam mana kan?
Just want
Ya.
the idea of
Dan if you go to Surah Ma'idah, I think chapter, was it chapter 6? Chapter 5, verse number 6. It talks about three things. About wudu, about usul or taking bath, compulsory bath, ya, dan juga about tayammum. At the end of the verse, Allah Ta'ala said, وَمَا يُرِدُ اللَّهُ وَمَا يُرِدُ اللَّهُ يَجْعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ حَرَجٍ وَلَكِنْ لِيُطَهِّرَكُمْ وَيُتِمَّ نِعْمَتَهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. Allah said, Allah Ta'ala did not want to burden you with wudu, with ghusl or taking bath after, after menstrual period, or after you're having sexual intercourse or whatever. But Allah SWT wanted to purify you and and to complete His blessing. So we wouldn't appreciate nowadays, because when we talk about making ablution, wudu, we just go to the water tap, open the water tap and make wudu. As simple as that. Want to take a bath? That's bathroom. Yeah. But just imagine, during the period of Nabi Muhammad SAW, the Prophet Muhammad SAW, Arabs are divided into two types of community. The Bedouins and the Hadar. Hadar means civil, bukan civilized, kita katakan dwellers, dwellers of towns, settlers, and also the Bedouins. The access to water was not really easy like we're having nowadays. There was no water tap. Yeah. But they live in desert. The only source of water is wells. Oasis, well. Kan, kat mana ada oasis, kat itu dia buat bandar. Jadi just imagine, if you want to perform your salat 5 times a day, you need to deal with water. And and daily for those who are having family or whatever, they have to take bath. Yeah. And it's rather new in the life of Arab. And Arabs were known of their, let me say, kehidupan yang tidak based on water. The civilization of Arab was never get used to water. Jadi bila datang macam ni, they feel it's kind of burdensome. But they never realize that because of water, Arab has changed into a civilized human being. Water normally being dominated by the elites, bourgeoisie, by the Quraysh tribe, Abu Jahal, Abu Lahab. Why? Because they are the nobles and the elite, so it's only them who having the privileges to wear good clothes and to take bath, whatever. But with Islam, everybody were told to take bath and to wear the best garments, the best clothes they have, at least once in a week.
How about the Romans and Persia? Do they have some access towards it?
Definitely. Roman, the fact that the previous civilizations, they all started with water. Greek, Romans, Byzantine, Persian, because you can only use water to purify yourself and to clean yourself. Okay? But not the case of the Arabs. Arab was not known of being friendly with water.
The Roman bath, they take shower every day, just once a month.
It depends on your
Where you live.
where you live and who you are. If you live in a castle, definitely you have access to water, whatever. But if you live on the street, definitely it's a different issue. So what happened to the Arab? It was the idea of wudu dengan mandi ni has pushed them towards the realm of idea. So they know that they have to live with water. They need to make wudu. They need to wear the best clothes at least once a week. Kalau yang bini ramai tu tiap hari kena mandi kan. So this kind of thing Jadi created a lot of water technology tau. Aku ada, storage of water, and not any type of water you could use to make your ablution. Only purified water, kan? So it pushed them towards the realm of idea to go forward, and hence the civilization. So the inquisitive mind.
This one.
Oh, I thought sebenarnya. Okay. Jadi inquisitive mind ni dia datang juga dengan the idea of ihsan. You know ihsan? What is ihsan?
Doing something that best that you can.
Yes.
Make something beautiful, awesome.
Ihsan is very interesting. If you notice in one of the prophetic tradition, very famous one, yang Jibril came in the form of man, meeting Nabi Muhammad SAW, and nobody knows that guy for sure, but definitely it's not from Medina, kan? Tapi there's no sign of it's coming from afar. Tapi yang paling penting kat situ, dia tanya tentang iman, Islam, and eventually ihsan. When Prophet talked about ihsan, he said that you're worshipping God, you're worshipping Allah as if you're seeing Him, and if you couldn't reach that level, you feel that you've been watched by Allah. Yeah. So there's a pinnacle, maksudnya perfection, struggle towards perfection. That is ihsan. And talking about struggle towards perfection, it should be related also with another meaning of ihsan, which is mercy. Mercy towards yourself, mercy towards others, human fellow, and also mercy towards the environment. And I think everybody did notice about this. Yang Nabi kata, Inna Allah kataba al-ihsan ala kulli shay. Allah SWT ordained mercy into all these creatures. Whatever creature you're dealing with, you must deal with them with ihsan, with mercy. Even when you're slaughtering animal, you must make sure it is being slaughtered in a best way, in a merciful way. Sounds ironic, eh? But you need to consume it. That's part of human nature, okay? But you must doing it dengan ihsan. And even if you're doing the death punishment, again, make sure you're doing it based on ihsan. Jadi, the idea of ihsan, it creates a sense of let me say social awareness, or awareness within the heart of Muslims, supposedly, or you say ontologically, that in their pursuit of perfection, they must not forget mercy. Jadi, the civilization of the past, because soalan yang Azmi sent to me, talking about what are the factors and drivers, apart from inquisitive mind, you must have ihsan in terms of you try to do the best, you try to achieve the ultimate maximum that you could go, but again you must have objective behind it. Apa objective dia? To serve humankind and to serve the environment. Wa ma arsalnaka illa rahmatan lil alamin. That is why if you look at the scriptures or the manuscripts of those Muslim scientists of the past, although they are dealing with robotics, with structures, with machine, but they will start their introduction, or they will start their book, for example Al-Jazari and Banu Musa, with Quranic verses, quoting about how to be beneficial towards the others, how to be helpful towards the community. Sebab itu dia orang tak sign for IP, intellectual property, kan? So for them, they are doing everything in order to serve the community, in order to serve humankind. So ihsan strengthened them. Started from inquisitive mind, going towards ihsan to attain or to achieve the ultimate best, But for what purpose? To serve the others, to serve the humankind. Jadi, this is the, that we say, the secret or the recipe of the success of the previous Muslim scientists or scholars, whatever. But again, the backdrop of all this, apa tadi dia kata, inclusive mind, ihsan, is the idea of Islam. Became the backdrop of everything. Apa Islam? Reform, reform. Actually, Islam is should be best translated as a continuous struggle to attain perfection. Perfection. Islam is going towards perfection to achieve ihsan. Jadi from bad to good, from good to better, from better to perfection. Jadi benda tu jadi ni. Persoalannya sekarang, benda ni semua, mana dynamo ni? Dynamo dia tauhid. They know whatever they're doing in this worldly life, it's for the life hereafter. Even if they invent something, they know they're going to help others. Macam Jalaluddin Arumi, the great Sufi of Turkey, kata, minal haq ilal khalq. It's from the creator to the creatures. Means we are only intermediator. To let God's mercy to reach the community. So for Muslim scientists, dia buat apa semua tu bukan untuk dia get IP ke, dapat duit apa semua, tapi untuk apa? Okay, dia dapat duit, definitely, especially during the Abbasid period, they get a lot of perks from the caliphs. Caliphs will pay any of Muslim scientists who come up with new research, new ideas or books or whatever. And the gold, the amount of gold that will be given to them is based on the weights of their books. Okay. But again, that is not the main purpose. The main purpose is, for Islam, to serve the humankind. And they tahu whatever they are doing, it's for the life hereafter. Problem, issue, what we're having nowadays is, I'm going to be very cautious dealing with it. The dualistic nature of Muslim when they are dealing with Islam. In a way, most of Muslims say that, secularism, it's very un-Islamic, we cannot adopt secularism. But the way they look at Islam actually is very secularistic. I'll give you an example. Yesterday we did raise the issue of, the idea of good governance, being good citizens, providing good education and good services to the people. Is that part of Islam? Definitely. Yesterday we were talking about Islamic medicine, or Islamic medication. We know that there are certain culture and tradition in different societies when dealing with medicine, but to say there's something that is known as Islamic medicine or Islamic medication, it sounds very awkward. The fact that when you try to cure illness and try to help people, the action itself is very Islamic. Yang the modern medicine pun has a long route back to Muslim punya tradition, Ibn Nafis, Sina, and those big names. So, jadi orang kita pula dia nampak lain. Dia nampak, no. We should have those Islamic things. Those are not Islamic because they belong to the Western world. The other day, one of past leader, one of past, I say past saja, one of the past parliamentarian, he was giving his public ceramah. He said that, I've been to Australia. They have a good system and they have good people, and they call it good governance. PAS is not trying to achieve good governance. Anybody who want to live with good governance, go to Australia. Don't stay in PAS, because in PAS, what we are doing, we want to attain God's pleasure.
Okay.
That is why we want hudud and kepimpinan ulama. I said, what is this? This is a sheer Secularism. Yeah. It's secularism. No? The way you look, okay. Come to religious things, okay, there's a religious form. No. It's not about substance. Kalau ni, oh, this worldly life. Yeah. And this was not the attitude of Muslims in the past. For them, whatever they are doing, although they're inventing things, inventing still the realm of object. But the idea, the backdrop is, Tawheed. Whatever they are doing, it's for the life hereafter. In UAE, what happened? One of my colleagues, she used to work with NASA, but being a good Malaysian, we just returned to Malaysia to serve the country. And furthermore, she come back to UAE to serve Islam. So she invented a lot. She has a lot of IPs. Anyway, in NASA, they really help each other and they really encourage their workers to excel in whatever they are doing. Jadi professor sana tak kedekut lah. If they are newbies, they will train you to see that same level with them. Ini sikap begitu Islamic kan? It's very Islamic things. Bukan ada benda kau nak simpan kau sendiri kan? Kau lokal-lokal sendiri, orang lain mampu kau lah. Tapi when you have supervisees, then you manipulate the supervisees for your own purposes. This is a mentality of third world countries and very unfortunate we have a lot of them in our community. Tapi tak, they would like to share, they would like to build you up. Dia balik Malaysia. Bila balik Malaysia, she has to, despite of this more than 10 years experience working with NASA, she has to go to teaching training, or what they call as Islamic Enhancements Program. So ada senior professors monitoring her, and this senior professor never had any fingerprints in NASA pun. Tapi because they were there for how many decades, after she presented one of her things, whatever, they came up with an observation. See, it's very good. Your teaching style is excellent. Whatever you share with your students is, beyond beyond normal, beyond average. But you miss one thing. Apa dia kata? Islamic element. So she was astonished. What is not that un-Islamic in what I'm doing? He said, oh, you must quote at least some Quranic verses and some hadith. That you must relate whatever you're doing to Quranic verses. So this girl came to me and said, hey, how should I connect? She's doing the glucose sensor in order to detect glucose, and also when we were helping the flood victims, she helped us to menapis air itu. To filter the water. Bukan, there's another word for it. Huh? Purification. So, okay lah. There's another word for it. Tak tahu lah ini water engineer. Installation. Jadi, she has this thing. Dia macam straw. You can drink from contaminated water. Even, kan? Ini UN banyak pakai. Ya, UN banyak pakai. So, despite of those things, dia kata, hey, where to get this ayat Quran for whatever I'm doing? I said, whatever you're doing is very Quranic. Dia kata, ya ke? Dia said, that was not my professor's comments, because they don't learn Quran like me. And furthermore, they would like to envisage in this so-called Islamization of knowledge thing, which means nothing actually. Kata, wah, tak jumpa lah benda ni apa ni, Quran ayat. Kata, should you? Kata, whatever you're doing is Islamic unless it's proven otherwise. Whatever you're doing in your lab, whatever you're trying to train your students, that's very Quranic. That's very aligned with what Rasulullah SAW taught us. Yeah. Dia kata, tapi my professor said, no, you must quote something. I said, gini lah, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Verily we do not send you except to be the mercy to humankind. That's enough. Let that be a backdrop to whatever you're doing. You're helping the flood victims, and now you're doing the glucose sensor for and for whatnot to help diabetic patient or whatever. I think that enough is very Islamic. Okay, and you wear headscarf. What else can? And even if you don't wear headscarf, whatever you're doing is very Islamic. Okay. I don't know what happened to her. Because I know she's not going to challenge her professor. Nanti tak boleh promoted lah. When the other part get very critical. Just like the other day when people, one of my colleagues, she was organizing this conference that she called the Islamic advertisement. Islamic advertisement. She interviewed me, knowing I'm an ustaz, so with the hope that I could give some input. The very first remark, the very first comment I've given to her is, there's no such thing as Islamic advertisement. Oh, dia terkejut. Kata, why? The fact that there's no such thing. There is what we call as ethical advertisement, and that's very Islamic. And we're talking about advertisement. Let me put off my ustaz cap. Let me talk as a normal, human fellow. I said, actually, advertisement is a form of deception, because throughout advertisement, you are creating a false demand. When you have a lot of demands beyond your production, it will determine the price. So actually, advertisement is part of commercialization lies to create more consumer society, reinforcing the capitalism, and it's very unethical. Jadi dia kata, come on, dia kata, you're challenging the norm. That's so bad. Kan kata, but being a pro-market person, I think this is part what we call as errors in market. Actually, you're creating false demand. So dia kata, is that what we call as un-Islamic advertisement? There's no such thing Islamic or un-Islamic. I know there are Muslims, but to call something Islamic advertisement, I don't know. Kata, in my humble opinion, I just couldn't accept that. Kata, no, we should have. Kata, whatever term Islamic that being used nowadays is a form of politics of identity, actually, and part of the part of this post-colonialist reactionist phenomena. The same thing that we discussed yesterday about Islamic political system. I know Muslim political systems. Whatever. That's what my guru Rashid Ghanushi taught me. There's no such thing as the Islamic political system. The idea of having the Islamic political system, which is very Maududic actually, based on Maududi point of view, is a reaction towards colonization. And he was talking about the creation of Pakistan actually. Yesterday we have talked about this. And I said, there's no such thing. There are Muslim political systems. When talking about Muslim political systems, which model do you want? That book written by Abdul Wahab Effendi is very useful, Who Wants an Islamic State. I would encourage you guys to give a read, to give a try. You can find a PDF copy of it, free of charge. I don't know. Please. And please share it with everybody.
I will add to the shared folder if I find it.
Yeah. It's a free market world. It's a free market world. Okay, so coming back to our discussion, okay, this idea of inclusistic mind, ihsan, and islah, and also tawheed, this is the recipe that has managed to brought civilization to the Muslim world. And another thing, you're talking about Islamic civilization, unlike a lot of other civilizations in the past, it is not attached to any race. You have Indian, Ganges River civilization, Mesopotamian civilization, you have Egyptian civilization, you have Chinese civilization, you have a lot Roman civilization. They are all being attributed towards certain race, certain geographical territory. But unlike that, Islamic civilization was very universal, and it was not only dominated by Muslims. Ibn Sina, he was excommunicated by the majority Muslim community due to his heretic ideas. But again, people recognize him as part of what? Muslim scientists. Yeah. Ibn Tufayl, that we discussed yesterday, and few other names. Some of them, I mean, they were not known to be Muslim. Yeah. Zindi. But again, their contribution is part of that universal civilization. And we talk about Islamic civilization, it consists of, different race and different community contribution towards this big humanity. Now, we come to another premise which nowadays, due to the colonization and post-colonization, reaction that we're living with, we become very exclusive. We become very exclusive. When we talk about Islamic, it normally associated with certain form. Unlike those the age of civilization, it could be anybody. Yes, and they're very inclusive. Okay, you have a problem with your theological ideas, that wouldn't stop you from contributing towards the knowledge. That won't stop you from contributing towards the society. Okay. And the fact that you attribute yourself to the big Muslim community shows the openness of Islam that we practice of that period. Sebab tu kalau macam dekat Andalus, you heard of Andalus kan? Islamic Spain, Jamia Granada ataupun Granada, Jamia Cordoba, Cordoba. They produce a lot of graduates from all over the Europe, including from the Christian land. And many of non-Muslims who live in that Andalusia have adopted a lot of Islamic values in their life while maintaining their faith. Itu yang perkataan Mozarat, if you heard of the word Mozarat. Okay. And this is what known as La Convivencia, living together. That was not known, and it was very, awkward and peculiar for the vast European land during that age, the age of darkness. Muzarat maksudnya the Jewish and the Catalonians ataupun Christians yang living with Muslim culture. They speak Arabic. They wear Muslim dress, yeah, and some of them they even doing their prayer in Arabic.
Dalam bahasa Arab tu bahasa apa?
Itu bukan bahasa Arab, itu bahasa orang. Bahasa Spanish maybe, but La Convivencia definitely is not Arabic, I think. You can still see the remnants of that when you go to Hamra. Ada satu tower tu yang project by Roger Grody. You find a room where he put three major scientists. Ibn Rushd of Muslim, Moses bin Maimun of the Jewish people, and somebody that Christian scientist. They were discussing. Yeah. Jadi zaman yang people live with this openness and inclusivity. La Convivencia. Okay. Yes, Nick.
Yeah, in fact, there is a documentary I think on National Geographic basically showing the so-called Arabic heritage of southern Spain. and apparently, at least in the documentary, they have a few tours, paid of course, for visitors from the Middle East, tourists from the Middle East, basically showing the Arabic, the heritage, including the calligraphy on the building, etc.
You know, the best documentary on Islamic Spain, who produced it? Boris Johnson. ITV.
Okay.
Yeah, you go and search it on YouTube. Boris Johnson, Andalus. When he was still there, 2007, 2008, he produced that. So it's interesting. I mean, this guy is a loose cannon. I mean, and I mean, a year before, he was known of these severe attacks on Islam and Muslims here in London and also in Iraq. But he said that he has a Muslim grandfather from his maternal side, so it pushed him to investigate about something special within Islam. So it brought him to go to Spain. Yeah. Okay, coming back. Ni. Jadi inclusivity ni penting. Malangnya hari ini bila kita hidup in a very legalistic form of Islam, we tend to shun away from that inclusivistic practicing of Islam. Hari ini kita lebih dilihat dengan apa ni? The mentality of holier than thou. Okay. People are competing each other to out religious each other and to prove that they are more religious than others, and those, but unfortunately not in the term of substance, but in the term of forms and symbol. But you'll be surprised, some personalities who were known of their, you know, lifestyle yang kadang-kadang womanizer whatever, when talking about hudud, they become a hero of hudud, which is very ironic. When it comes to the issue of Allah, kan, the usage of Allah name by the Catholic Herald, well, they became the defender of Muslim faith. What is this? I mean, you just couldn't fathom the comical situation in Malaysia.
Going back to the idea of the Islamization of Malaysia as in general, or Muslims in Malaysia, I think one reason why this trend is happening is because when you're talking about we are actually part of a universal value, all these values of justice, mercy, etc. They're universal values and not particularly Islamic, and therefore there's no need to inject Islamic terms into it. But I think one reason why it's, and it relates to another question that was asked yesterday, what makes Islam different therefore? I mean, what is the necessity of having an Islam even if you can live and survive in a purely humanistic, you know, like we've got jurisprudence that divorces religion from. Anyway, so this kind of feeling, in Malaysia at least, feeling that, or any other actually Islamic country, feeling that we need some form of reminder that we are not merely part of the universal, we are Muslims, we have Tawheed, we have something different. So my question really is, Islamicization is a response to feeling, like you said, we're losing our identity. What's another way? I think what would be a better way for us to you know, come back to the substance of Islam without, you know, just going formalistic, being legalistic? What would be the best way to remind ourselves that we are Muslim, but not purely, you know, like, so we're not just part of this universal, we are.
Is that necessary? No, sorry.
Yeah. Otherwise, the question, it begs the question, what would make Islam necessary?
It's faith. It's matter of faith.
Can I just comment something based on your example in this question as well? I think when it comes to a relation between Islam and everything, every single Muslim and perhaps all the scholars will agree that Islam has something to do with everything. But the most important thing to understand and to extend the discussion further is that how do Islam deal with all those things? Because everything is not the same thing. For instance, when you are dealing with faith, when you are dealing with creed, the aqidah, there's a certain way to deal with it. And when it comes to the act of worship, the ibadah, there's a certain way to deal with it. But when it comes to politics and human relation, there's a different way to deal with it, and it's to make it Islamic. So in order to make the human relation Islamic, it's not the same way of dealing with the creed and ibadah issue, the act of worship issue. So because I'm really worried that when people cannot distinguish the different way of dealing with different things, they will say that, okay, this is how Islamic politician should be. For example, if this guy if this politician is wearing like jubah or the ketayab and everything, but doing all the corruption and all the massive destruction to the world, and compared to another guy which is, for example, non-Muslim, even non-Muslim, and serving the humanity, serving the mercy, there will be a tendency to say that we still choose this politician because they are quoting the religious text, they are wearing like a Muslim, although they are not delivering the mercy to the. My point is that yes, we recognize that Islam is comprehensive and cover everything, but it is much more important to realize that how to deal with all those different branches of human aspect. I don't know whether.
No,
I think the point of a question is that how to remind ourselves that our identity as Muslims, because Islam must have something different from other things,
Yeah, because if we're talking
aside
about,
from the universal.
yeah, because if we're talking about even in our approach to politics, if we want to, not associate it with ibadah, etc. If we talk about politics and the objectives of Islamic politics, amanah, tawhid, etc., you could achieve that with a secular system.
Yeah, sure.
You can definitely achieve that without hudud. I mean, that's my point being that it's not necessary to bring a specifically Islamic element to the discourse. So therefore, like people feeling that we can exist without Islam, and therefore why?
So basically, it will beget the question: what's the point of Islam anyway?
Yeah.
no. Why should you go towards that extreme?
Because
No, but by not having those forms or whatever, it does not mean that you negate Islam from your life.
I think the reason that you became negation is because you are attached to the form, not to the substance. And so when you see that, and for normal people on the streets, where they are more concerned with the forms, with the frame of object. So when they see that this person, they wear something that looks Islamic, yeah, we choose it then. And they didn't choose the other one who, like what you mentioned earlier, that is practicing the Islamic values without the identity of Islam.
No. Okay, I don't know, why should we choose the two extremes? I couldn't see the need to negate or segregate within your Islamic identity and whatever we are doing. We are not saying, okay, because this is a universal value, so we don't really need Islam to be there. I don't see that. I see that this is universal value and it's being recognized by Islam. And as Muslims, my inner conviction tells me that I should embrace that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So, but that does not mean like we are creating, because I'm a Muslim, I have my inner conviction, so whatever universal is universal, I need something to assert or to re-assert that I have Muslim identity. That's politics of identity. You know what I mean? Okay, and it is different from the captive mentality. Captive mentality, they don't really feel the needs of religion anyway. These are universal values, I'm with the universal values. But for Islamists like me, I feel that I could accept those universal values because my religion, okay. Kosong yang kau bagi orang ni.
That water.
Pass the other way around.
I don't think it's appropriate to give the speaker to distribute water. Though I believe in equality, but it's not towards that extent.
To that extent.
Siapa tadi? No. Okay, let's speak in Malay. Saya tak nampak kenapa mesti gitu.
Okay, so my question actually isn't in contradiction to your statement. I do believe that we are part of universal, but it relates back to Azman was saying. It's more of what is the best way of for us to remind ourselves that we belong to a very specific identity without resorting to a
I think she's speaking from let's say from point of view of someone who either number one doesn't really have a strong holding in Islam itself in their own religion if they're a Muslim, or secondly from a non-Muslim's perspective. So what's the point of Islam from their point of view? How do you strengthen? How do you
So it goes back to behavioral issue. Good Muslims supposedly should embrace those kind of universal values because of their inner conviction. If they're not a good Muslim, they won't practice all those good values. So supposedly, if you are being a good Muslim, you're wearing jubah or whatever, you won't take bribe, you won't do corruption, and you'll be more friendlier towards the environment. Why? Because you feel that is your deeds to the life.
So basically, this is from a point of view of someone who believes he's a Muslim, who has a strong faith in the religion, and then this is the message that you're giving to him. Look, this is what Islam says, so you need to do it like this. But I think where she's coming from is, let's say, from the perspective of someone who doesn't really have a strong faith in the religion, or someone who has a more secular background. How do you, how do you say? It's not encouraged. How do you convince the person that your faith, your Muslim faith, is actually the true faith, or something like that?
Dia tak nak komen juga. Saya rasa awak nak tanya macam ni kan. Apa perlu kepada agama kalau orang boleh jadi baik tanpa agama?
Yeah, so there are two questions in the question. So the first one would be that what both of you are talking about, and the second would just
Okay, let me answer that.
Yeah.
You need agama to go to heaven.
Yeah, I get that. Islam is not just, we're not just talking about Islam in context. We are talking about Islam and therefore Islam reinforces these values. And I get it, it's not a dichotomy, but so I would be able to understand the first question.
Okay.
Moving on to the second question, which is how do we as Malaysian Muslims remind ourselves that we are part of a Muslim identity without being over egalistic, formalistic, which is why I think people respond to, people in university lecturers, like your example, would say that we need to remind people that this is part of tradition, therefore introduce hadith, therefore introduce surahs. Not because this makes sense.
It makes total sense.
I don't know if this helps from a non-religious, non-Islamic point of view. One of the responses to those two questions is firstly at the point of law. Everybody knows that vast majority, but not all legal systems aim to achieve justice, equality. But not all have the same way of doing it. In fact, in many situations, we don't know what is just, what is equal. That's why you have different sets of laws appropriate to different circumstances, cultures, regions, and special circumstances telling you what is just. But the underlying principle is still the same. It's still substance versus form. Forms are a way of achieving a different substance. But those forms are different in every region and every culture. And therefore you need different systems identified by different markers to help you achieve that, but they are not determinative of the underlying principles. And from a Buddhist point of view, they recognize that, at least for us, they recognize that other religions have even better ways perhaps to achieve what principles we call as Buddhist, but may be common and underlying to those who don't identify with our religion. But the way we do that is basically say, hold fast to those principles, recognize that those are other perfectly legitimate ways of achieving the same thing, but recognize that if this is the way that suits you best, go with that way so that you have peace of heart. But I don't really have something similar like that in Islamic Quran scriptures or anything like that.
Azmin jawab.
Short answer is there is, but I will get to that when we get to your questions. some part of your question overlaps with another question already on the Taman's list. So maybe we can answer in full when we get there. But then I guess let me try to rephrase your question. Suppose I'm a non-practicing Muslim living in the West, for example, or maybe living in Malaysia. I see all this injustice / un-Islamicness everywhere, but I'm not practicing Muslim at all. Suddenly, I've got the call to return to Islam, so-called. I want to be a good Muslim again, or maybe for the first time ever, doesn't matter. And then, in my mind, how do I best achieve that? How can I go to being a good Muslim overnight? How can I be Islamic just like that, or like the fastest way to get there? So maybe one of them would be to join Daesh. So I go to Syria, wage war, die. That's it, go to heaven. That might be the easiest way. That would remind myself that is one way to be a good Muslim. Or I can take, say, a totally secularistic approach. Let's say volunteer for Red Cross. Be a good Muslim that way. Go to some war zone, help people. Then maybe I can be a good Muslim that way, in a purely secular way. Or maybe in particular case to our Ikram friend, join Ikram. Join the association. Then I'd be a good Muslim that way. So what would be the best way for someone like me, who's not a practicing Muslim, not a good Muslim, but suddenly want to be a good Muslim, and remind myself that I am a Muslim, and I want to show to everyone that I'm a Muslim. And this is the Islamic way. Is that more or less 50%?
Question of the individual deriving their identity from it. The activity forms part of the person.
Okay, so how can you add to the person more from that?
Shika, I think that's a slight dichotomy because Dr. You don't seem to think that the issue of identity as a form is of any significant importance over there. Here, you need an identity.
Yeah.
So in a way, the underlying assumptions of both speakers are slightly different. So that's why you don't have the common ground. She's asking how to achieve identity, using identity is not that
No,
important.
it depends upon because I think we're talking about political thoughts. Talking about political thoughts.
I am. Yeah, I am. Yeah.
And she's not talking about being a pious or good Muslim in terms of personal conducts, whatever. I mean,
I think the point is that the where you need to identify yourself as a Muslim is a separate topic altogether, as opposed to in terms of the political structure.
yeah, because if you're talking about being a pious Muslim, practicing Muslim, I mean, you practice whatever religion taught you in terms of ibadah, akidah, whatever we explained, the ritual and everything.
And in politics, you have to achieve those values to be a good Muslim.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah, but I guess I'm starting from the individual before going to the organization or like social structure or even like political system.
No, is that what you mean? It seems like you're having something that nobody could understand.
I think Hazwan understands my question really. He said it's the point of the question is,
If you are subscribing to something which is universal, and you are a Muslim, how can you retain your Muslim identity by subscribing to something which is supposedly universal?
No. Okay.
yeah.
By subscribing towards the universal values in which field?
Politics.
In politics. Okay. Does that mean you're not Muslim?
Can I give a practical?
Because Muslims, I mean, we're talking about identity, whatever, is part of your inner conviction to God. And whatever you practice, and prove that you're Muslim. Okay. The question is not about is Muslim, it's about being Islamic, actually, what you mean. Am I right?
I think
Whatever you're doing, you try to prove that this is Islamic,
The Islamic way.
the Islamic way of doing it.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
What is Islamic and what is not? For example, if you are adhering to certain universal values, okay, make it very, we try to narrow down. Is in political realm, political activities. Betul? Okay. You're doing those good governance, whatever. Okay? You say that it's very universal, everybody is doing it. Okay? So, what make myself an Islamic politician when I'm doing that. Is that what you mean? So that comes back to your epistemology, to your ontology and epistemology issues.
Yeah, metaphysics.
Yeah.
I was about to answer that.
Yeah, yeah. It's coming about your reference. You should remember we're talking about, is it about sovereignty or is it about reference? Can yesterday we did talk about that. I think your reference that makes you Islamic. Okay, whether, for example, you definitely cannot get rid of quoting Quran or whatever. Okay, put aside my colleague's issue tadi. That's a different way. But now, why you are doing that? Why you engage with these universal things? Good governance, for example, you're going against corruption, you're helping the poor, whatever. Because of your epistemological or metaphysics, you choose conviction. God told you to do this. It's a God's call. Macam Christian dia cakap lah. God's call for you to save people. God's call for you. And what makes you really Islamic? What makes you really Islamic? Because you're doing that for the favor of hereafter. Okay, number one. And number two, you may say that, but that is my personal conviction. How do I appear to be Islamic in compared to others? Is that what you mean?
The first, I think your first answer my.
Okay. So you don't really need the idea of showing that you are Islamic.
No, so I mean, just by way of like, how does a Muslim remind themselves that they're not simply part of a universal? Is by reminding yourself that your point of reference is
Precisely.
the Quran, and I think translating that to, bringing that back to Malaysia, and us reminding people that you have a specific point of reference in the Quran, and you don't need to inject like an overt Islamization is really the
Okay, let me give you an example. In Malaysian politics, a question: How could a DAP Muslim politician maintain his or her Islamic identity?
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Actually, I was going to go there just now. I was going to say, how can a Muslim in the AP, a secular party who holders who do etc., but fight on the AP platform, a purely secular platform, like Red Cross I did just now, because I did not want to go to the AP, but okay, let's go to the AP now. But I want to say first, in my conscience, very clear, I'm a Muslim. I don't support laicity or extreme view of secularism, but I work within like a secular system. But I want to like achieve what Islam wants to achieve, something along that line lah. So go back to you. Sorry, I just want to add on top of that.
Yeah. So how? Is it by being in the group which is known of their, certain value that they subscribe to will make you un-Islamic, or you are being with them in achieving certain universal values that could be recognized as Islamic by your conviction will make you remain as Muslim. The same thing, the same dilemma being discussed by Muslims here in the UK. Those Tories, those Labours, and Lib Dem. Can they be a Lib Dem member, a Tory, a Labour, but at the same time they maintain their Muslim identity? Because there are certain things that will be propagated or be supported by the party, which will go against what you believe. Okay. Does that make any sense? Okay. So they discuss about it. They say that being an individual in the party, you have the right to oppose. But again, at the end of the day, it's up to the majority to decide for you. Okay.
Can I intervene? If you have something more to add, please ask now, because otherwise I need to move on to the next.
Yeah.
Okay. Dan nanti boleh sambung lagi lah, ada soalan sama kita.
Okay,
so
boleh ke guna contoh Nabi Yusuf?
yeah, actually a large part of Ibn Taymiyyah's political theory is based on example of Nabi Yusuf, which in this particular case is a prophet, of course Israelite, who lived in Pharaoh Egypt, like very un-Islamic in theological sense, and then made a minister, and then have to like rule over a non-Muslim country. So how can he propagate the Islamic, value of good governance and achieve what God wants in his life and in the
Okay, I'm giving you a bigger example, Najashi.
Yeah.
Najashi himself being a king, negus kan, of a Christian country. Itu zaman masih ada lagi Christian state lah. Nowadays there's no such thing. Okay, but he's Muslim. And Muqawqis himself, the governor of Roman Empire, kan, who was about to convert to Islam, and Rasulullah SAW also recognized, become a Muslim, maintain your Islamicity, and one of his viziers converted to Islam and remained there. Okay, another example in Surah Ghafir, Allah SWT was talking about a vizier of Pharaoh who were the supporter of Moses, Mu'min min Ali Fir'aun, a believer within Fir'aun cabinet, within Fir'aun court. He maintained his identity, but being in an un-Islamic government.
But I guess definitely your example is more relevant to us today, because these are post-prophetic era lah. So because pretty much they had to adapt to their circumstances and situation. But in particular case, half of it happened in Prophet's lifetime. So he recognized that it's okay to do that. Like, I approve, kind of. Right? If we were to go to the Prophet era, in this case, Prophet Joseph, of course we Muslims believe the Prophet is infallible. So definitely him being in that position and exercising his powers, etc., was correct, definitely. But then I guess maybe if you can think of another few questions along that line later,
okay,
we can probe more.
Can we continue?
Yeah, but we have to go to the KPM's list of questions.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay.
Now?
Now.
Okay.
Because we actually have another program at 3, yeah?
What program?
Not with us, KPM. So
okay,
okay.
Okay, good.
But Doctor, sorry to jump the gun over here. So we've talked a lot about mainly the principles of identity, how to achieve a good civilization, excellence, ESA, and so on, and these similar principles. So I'm referring specifically now to the Islamicity Index, which has come up by Dr. Hossein Askari and Sheikh Zabrayman. And Malaysia is not doing very well, didn't do very well in that particular index. In fact, it was number 33, with Kuwait coming in at 42. The most Islamic state, according to that index, which rates stuff like things like governance, human rights, liberalism, and several other economic and educational indices, it was Ireland that came out as the most Islamic countries. So, in relation to this in general, what are your views firstly about the framework, the indices in general? Are they accurate? Are they appropriate?
Okay, it's rather interesting when the result of whatever Askari is doing, he put Ireland. I mean, the previous year it was New Zealand.
Yeah.
We could appreciate New Zealand, but we talk about Ireland with its post-crisis situation and also its economic situation. You begin to ask yourself, oh, what's so special about this? Economically, it's not that very good. But anyway, if you're dealing not only with Malaysia, but most of Muslim countries, there's nothing new. Nothing new. If you read Umair Chapra's book on 2010, he wrote that book about reviving Muslims, 2009, reviving Muslim civilization or whatever. He did deal with the issue of governance. He said that by no way Muslim could revive its civilization with the certain governance conditions in Muslim countries. They're not only not performing well in this index of Askari, but also if you look in governance index,
Yes.
they perform badly, freedom of press index, democracy index, human rights index, education. I mean, none of Muslim countries have universities that have been listed in the top 50 or top 100. A friend of mine, Dr. Zulkifli Hassan, a lecturer in USIM, managed to put all those indexes and try to explain where Muslims are. And when it comes to R&D, they perform very badly. And a large chunk of the budget of those countries went to defense. And with no reason, including a country in Southeast Asia, which put a lot of their money in defense when they are not engaging in any war with any country. Yeah, so it's a big question mark there. So it's nothing new, talking about the situation and talking about the rights. But again, you know, you have two ways to look into this Islamicity index. I mean, because this guy is purely looking into the Islamicity based on certain characteristics, which mainly deal with economic, governance, and politics.
Yes.
Okay. So there are other issues that should be calculated. For example, welfare. For example, the issue of religiosity. Again, religiosity has not been addressed here.
I think they only mentioned for welfare and religiosity. Welfare, I think they put under governance.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, the ability of the governance to provide social utility and thing to the thing. And
Yeah,
religiosity is under human rights.
Yeah, but again, that is based on his interpretation. Because if you look at Islam,
Yes.
Islam has their own way to quantify that. For example, zakat.
Yes.
Yeah, how zakat being well distributed, how it being well collected, and how it managed to overcome the issue of poverty, the issue of, you know, those kind of issues. And it's not being included here. The issue of wakaf. Okay, for example, another thing, you're talking about religiosity, it also deals with the issues of, you know, mosques that have been built.
Yes.
And also other non-Muslim worship places that allowed to be built. That's not being calculated in this index. Now, if you look at the amount of the non-Muslim worshipping, let me say, buildings that have been built in Malaysia, far more than you have in Ireland, for example. So we have to be careful when dealing with these things. I mean, we cannot having it as a silver bullet to solve all the problems. I mean, but anyway, it's a good exercise.
Yeah.
It is a good exercise for Muslims to reflect on their political economic situation. But again, if I am a conservative looking at this kind of index, they would come up with a very theological based argument. They say, how in the world you want to measure the Islamicity of somebody of any of these countries when they themselves did not profess Islam as their religion? Okay, but I'm not trying to play with this kind of game, but rather looking at it in a very constructive manner and looking at it as a retrospection of Muslim countries to further improve Islam.
This in a way ties back to the previous question, doesn't it? That they are adhering to universal principles, but because the reason they're doing so is not because they're professing Islam or making the reference point back to the teachings of Islam. How could you possibly say that their reasons for doing so is Islamic? Isn't it? Right. In that case,
but again,
yes.
I mean, it was very surprising when looking at, you try to compare between Ireland and many Scandinavian countries.
Yes.
You would be surprised why didn't, you know, that part, I think it was, which country was it? Norway, they were included in top 10. But anyway, you'd be surprised why didn't any of them become the first three.
Well, you also mentioned a lot of other indices as well, but what about the Makasi index? Because I understand that there are some aspects of that which are fairly similar. So are we duplicating those things, or are we doing something which is necessary and new?
No, I think what first and foremost, I don't get involved with this Makasi index, though my university got involved, which means a lot. I mean, some amount of money is being channeled to my university, which is good anyway. But anyway, you're talking about maqasid, it's a slightly different because it does not really confine itself only to, let me say, politics, governance, and economic issue. It also calculates the first and foremost, let me say, concerns in maqasid, which is the preservation and promotion of religion, preservation and promotion of faith.
Yes.
So in that case, I think they would look into certain blind spots that are not being addressed well in Askaris. And when you're talking about another thing, which is the preservation and promotion of lineage, and also what they call it, they don't call it lineage, they call it apa tu? Nasab.
Legitimate.
No. They call it progeny. Yeah. This is a very, let me say, sensitive issue when we try to talk within the realm of human rights, because certain measurement and certain rulings in Islam with concern of the preservation of progeny might be perceived as something which is contradicting with human rights. Yeah. So, for example, the prohibition of, free sex, prohibition of anal sex, and those kind of things. And if you go furthermore, it's not only in maqasid, but also in our legal system. When you have the 377 that been used against Anwar the other day,
Yes.
It was very British origin,
Yes.
and very biblical origin, actually, being preserved and being maintained in Malaysian legal system. Quote. But again, when it comes to Islam, there are certain things that are being prohibited within that measurement. So that makes this index, that's maqasid index, different from Askaris.
You just mentioned that there are different ways to quantify or determine what is Islamic,
Yes.
essentially. So, looking at the teaching of Islam as a whole, some people might not agree with every single aspect of it. So, if it's basically some people, to borrow an analogy I've heard recently, if you play the rules of football, but you don't identify that the ball is essential to the game, you can't be simply playing football. Where is the line drawn over here if you recognize some teaching of Islam but not all? How can you say that I don't agree with these Islams, but I am still Islamic? Or is there a line to be drawn back there? Or
Yeah, could you disagree more with that?
okay.
Yeah.
So how should you define yourself if you do not agree, if one does not agree with every single aspect of Islam? Then? Would that person can still be
Okay.
in Islam?
It depends on how.
On your method.
No. On how you deal with it,
Right.
and in which area you're talking about. For example, you say that you're a Muslim, but you don't believe in God, the oneness of God. That's the end of it.
Yes.
So you must separate between the fundamentals and also the elementaries. Some elementaries you may not agree due to the inability for you to execute it.
Yes.
That's a different case with your position. If you disagree with it because you say that this is not what I prefer. Yeah.
Right.
So it's different when you deal with the fundamental things. Fundamental things, definitely, you say that you're a Muslim but you don't believe in hereafter. That's it.
That's it. Yes.
But again, it's rather irony. I'm trying to bring something which is interesting. Something when dealing with religion, with faith, it's a very subjective reality. You're dealing with an abstract. You don't deal with something that you can quantify.
Yes.
How could you quantify that this guy is a believer and this guy is not? Oh, sorry. No, we can quantify that. But I mean, how could you quantify that this is a practicing Muslim and this less practicing Muslim in terms of his belief or even practice? Yeah. Because sometimes when you deal with Islam, at the end of the day, it's all about your inner belief. But again, we're not dealing with this abstract metaphysical issue. We're dealing about things that could be quantified. The political and economic. But again, when you look at the... I think I've answered your question.
Yes, you have,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
So, moving on to a more topical issue in the news, hudud. Yes, might as well address the elephant in the room. To start off, to give us a bit of an idea of backdrop, apologies, I'm asking something that's probably obvious. What is Islam? Is it just a set of religious rules? Is it a political order, a social order, or a legal order? And how central is Hudud to Islam?
Okay, it's very interesting. Talking about hudud due to what's happening in Malaysia now.
Yes.
So you have to separate between two things, between the ideals and between what's happening on the ground. Yeah? Can we deal in that?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, we're talking about ideals. Islam that been preached by Prophet Muhammad has been taught as a complete teaching that guide you in many aspects of your life. And when it comes to that, Islamic rulings and Islamic teachings could be divided into three major categories. I mean, the belief system, the credos, and also the laws, or what is known as Sharia,
Yes.
and also the moral aspect, or akhlaq, they call it. And when you're dealing with the creed, definitely that's very fundamental. You may say that 3 minus 1 is 2. But here, when it comes to creeds, 3 minus 1 is 0. When you're dealing with the issue of rulings, the issue of laws, again, there are two types of it. Number one is the rituals, the basic. And number two is the, let me say, laws regarding interactions between human beings. Okay. The rituals is very fixed, but anyway, in many sense, a huge emphasis on Islam is based on the rituals actually.
Yep.
Yeah. And we're talking about rituals. There are three types of rituals. Number one, rituals is things that that only deal with your, let me say, with your physical. You know, you're performing salat, you're fasting during the month of Ramadan, Saum, and another rituals is rituals that dealing with your financial, zakat. You're doing slaughtering during the Hari Raya Haji, etc. Those are dealing with money. They're considered as ritual as well. And number three, things that involve both physical and financial, which in this case referring to Hajj.
Yes.
You get to sacrifice both your money and also your strength, your time,
Yes.
etc. For rituals, it's fixed. You're going to say that, okay, I'm a Muslim, but I don't want to pray. Okay, people will say that your Islam is not really complete. Though you're still Muslims, but you know what I mean? You may say that, oh, I'm a weak Muslim with a weak faith, so I'm not praying. That's fair enough, but you cannot say that, I'm a Muslim, but you should put away these prayer things, you should put away this Hajj thing. Hajj is too far, why don't we go to Paris, it's more interesting. No, you cannot say that, I mean, you cannot change that. It's definite, it's there. There's the identity of Islam. Okay, rituals. And the second part of law is laws that determining your interaction with other human fellows. So there you have other set of laws. For example, business transactions, etc. nowadays becoming very successful and being adopted all around the world, not only by Muslims but also by non-Muslims. The idea of prohibition of usury, riba, the idea of prohibition of monopoly, gambling, and etc. Okay, it could be well accepted by everybody. And you're also dealing with the issue of, for example, what do you call it, marriage, divorce, etc.
Inheritance laws.
Marital.
Yes.
Okay, doesn't it start with it? That's why you have Mahkamah Syariah in Malaysia normally dealing with those kind of issues.
Domestic.
Yeah. And also you have the issues of international relation that has been practiced by Prophet Muhammad, dealing with the issue of war and peace. And one thing about Prophet Muhammad himself, was not only a prophet and an imam that teaching people how to make your ritual, how to perform your ritual, but also he was a leader of a state and he was also a leader of army. So what made it so different, it superseded, I mean, it appeared 1,000 years before Geneva Convention, before all this international law and all those conventions regarding with prisoners' war, with war and genocide and those kind of things. And it's very interesting to have a person who's being a prophet but also leading his armies to war and reminding them not to kill women, not to kill children, and not to mutilate corpses and not to cut trees, and all sorts of things that you don't even think that this is the mentality of people of that time. Nobody pays attention to it. When war is war, cultural damage. Yeah, I'm talking about that period.
Yes.
But again, this guy was addressing something which is very ethical.
Yes.
But again, he, the Quran, did not recognize